Welcome to the Yoga Hour, offering insights and practices for spiritually consciously living today. Here's your host, Yogacharya, Ellen Grace O'Brian.
Welcome to the Yoga Hour, where we talk about yoga in all its depth and breadth as a path to spiritually conscious, fulfilled living in today's world. I'm Dr. Laurel Trujillo, co-host and producer of the show, and our topic today is Kriya Yoga and Planetary Evolution, Ancient Teachings in a Modern Era. We'll be discussing how Yogananda and others in the Kriya Yoga lineage viewed Kriya Yoga's role in planetary evolution and what it offers us for this time of change and challenge. Once again, I'm delighted to be here with founder, director, and host of the Yoga Hour, Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brian. Yogacharya O'Brian was ordained to teach in the Kriya Yoga tradition in 1982 by her guru, Eugene Davis, who was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. Yogacharya O'Brian is an internationally acclaimed spiritual teacher, author, poet, and the founder and spiritual director of the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, a Kriya Yoga meditation center with headquarters in San Jose, California. Yogacharya O'Brian has published several books, including Living the Eternal Way and The Jewel of Abundance, as well as several books of poetry, including the award-winning The Moon Reminded Me. Her online classes include Arta 365, Dharma 365, and Live the Eternal Way. You can find out more about her books and online programs at her website, ellengraceobrian.com. That's Brian with an A, Obrian.com, and csecenter.org. You can also follow her on social media, on Facebook at Ellen Grace O'Brian, and on Twitter at Yogacharya Live. Welcome, Yogacharya O'Brian. I'm really delighted to be with you today on the Yoga Hour.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. It's my joy to be here as a guest. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Yes. So before we dive into our dialogue about planetary transformation, let's begin with a moment of contemplation, a yoga moment. So let's take this opportunity just to bring ourselves fully present. First, bringing our attention to our bodies in space, whatever we're doing, feeling the surfaces that support us, feeling perhaps our feet on the floor. If we're sitting, feeling our body in the chair, just noticing. And then turning our attention to the breath and just noticing on the next inhale and exhale. Not trying to change the natural rhythm of the breaths, just noticing its natural flow. On the next inhale, you may feel cool air entering the nostrils. And on the exhale, warmer air flowing out. And as we sit here, right where we are, here's something to contemplate, taken from Yogacharya O'Brian's book, Living for the Sake of the Soul. Nothing occurs that cannot bring us closer to God realization. Everything that happens is an invitation to discover the truth. Whether engaged in action in the world or the stillness of meditation, it can be our goal to know the truth and live it. There are no mundane days for those whose hearts are on fire to realize God. So once again, Yogacharya O'Brian, so delightful to be here with you on the Yoga Hour today. Your teacher, Eugene Davis, was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, as I mentioned in the introduction, and Yogananda and others in our Kriya Yoga lineage viewed the world as an awakening world. So let's start there. Would you say more about this yogic vision of an awakening world? And it looks like maybe there's a little freeze. Hopefully Yogacharya O'Brian will be right back. And in the meantime, I can say that Yogacharya's, that Yogananda's vision definitely was one of an awakening world. He saw, and actually others in our lineage, Sri Yukteswar wrote a book, actually, The Holy Science, and it looks like she's back. I was just talking about how Yogananda's vision was definitely one of an awakening world, and that Sri Yukteswar had written a book, The Holy Science. So maybe you can take it from there.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know. I just got disconnected, so I'm glad to be connected again.
Yes, me too.
It's always important to be connected.
Yes.
So, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is that, during this time that we're living through right now of global pandemic and, of course, economic unrest and political and social upheaval, it can be difficult day to day, to hold a positive view. Oh, and I forgot to include, climate
Yes.
distress. And so it can be difficult to hold a positive view of what's happening in our lives. And I wanted to hold up that yoga, and in particular Kriya Yoga tradition specifically, has always held that we're actually in a time of global awakening, of an evolutionary thrust of consciousness on the planet. And I so appreciate that my guru, Roy Eugene Davis, and his guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, his guru, Sri Yukteswar, as you mentioned, always included this in their teaching. It's like, okay, you have to step back from, what's going on in this particular moment in time and look at it in a much larger context. So, of course, the groundbreaking work that Sri Yukteswar offered in his treatise, The Holy Science, was about how Vedic science holds what is called the Yugas, or these 1,000-year cycles of the manifestation of the world process. And he uncovered an error in calculation of the timing that would place us in what is called Dwapara Yuga, or the time of awakening on the planet, versus a time of decline. So these stages go from, awakening to the decline, and it's like the seasons,
Right.
where we go from, spring to summer to winter. And so in the Vedic consciousness, these trends of manifestation and dissolution occur over 12,000-year periods. So it is definitely a big view. And so there are some who hold that we are in now what is called Kali Yuga, which is an age of decline. And certainly we could look right now and say, yes, amen, this is an age of decline. Look at all the trouble we're in.
Right.
But Sri Yukteswar said, no, there was a slight error in the calculation in the almanac. And if you look, you can see, and he corrected that error, that we are in the initial stages of what is called Dwapara Yuga, which is an ascending cycle. And during this cycle, there are times, we begin to see the awakening of consciousness to finer forces. In other words, the mind becomes more finely tuned to what is invisible, which is a quality of the mind illumined. So, from a purely material age, purely consciousness only of matter, humanity begins to be aware of subtle laws in nature and in the cosmos. And, some of the signs of that, of course, early on were, the ecology movement, where, we began to see the connection of science, all over the planet, and, what is behind climate science today. And, just the, in medical science, becoming aware of, germ theory and things like that, that were, when you think about it before, in ages not so long past, there was not that sense of, what was causing these problems, on a physical level. So then we see, this, when we look at it in terms of global awakening, we see an awareness of ecology. We see this vast change that has come through technology that connects the world instantaneously, the World Wide Web that mirrors, this awakening of consciousness to our connectivity. So let me just say, and then I'll turn it back to you, that if we start to step back and look and say, oh, okay, well, we're in a time of global awakening to our connectivity, to more subtle levels of awareness. This is actually very hopeful. And then people would say, well, why is everything such a mess? Because we're in a time of transition. Right. And so, there are errors for us to correct at this time, and they're coming up precisely because we need to correct them. And when I think about the pandemic and political unrest and social injustice and climate degradation, I think, oh, we finally have an awareness that we are living in a very small house. Right. We're a lot of people living in a crowded house. And we need to learn, how to get along, how to support one another. But this is all part of the plan for us to wake up and learn how to do it.
Absolutely. And I was reflecting as you were talking, what came to my mind was there's a Chinese symbol for emergency, and that includes the symbols for crisis and also opportunity. And that those two really do go together. And there is an opening that happens when things feel like they may be falling apart in a way for something new to emerge, that opportunity to transform ourselves, which I think is a hopeful way, as you were saying, to look at what's going on in today's world. I was also struck by the things you were talking about and how really it's pointing us towards this deeper realization of yoga about oneness, about connection. So did you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. When we say planetary awakening, we want to understand that. And I think this is so important for those who are practicing yoga or, those spiritual practitioners engaged in, metaphysical studies. We understand that awakening to oneness, of course, is awakening to our connection with one another. It's our connection with divine life, with God, however you want to think of God, with ultimate reality, our connection to the earth. So in oneness, everything is connected, and our minds are seen and understood as a portion of universal mind. So that is why I wanted to talk about this today, because those of us who are awake have a particular responsibility to make sure that we attune ourselves to a higher vision, so that we're not caught up in despair. Yeah. It's hard not to worry from time to time, that's just going to be natural, but it's important to study today, and to reflect on what is happening, and then of course to meditate and be guided towards right action. How can we contribute to a global and planetary evolution and awakening, which is what we're here to do.
Absolutely. So that's what you mean when we say evolution, right? Planetary evolution is waking up to that truth that is at the root again of yoga, that oneness, and both self-realization and God realization, as you just mentioned.
Yeah, and my guru put it this way. He said, although, the problems that we face are manifold, and we need to do our best to, engage in right action to solve those problems. But we should not think that solving any one of those problems, whether it is, world hunger, climate change, social injustice, that solving any one of those problems is going to take care of it, because it won't. The only thing that is going to take care of it comprehensively is the change in consciousness that self and God realization brings. So when the yogis talk about evolution, they're talking about the evolution of consciousness, which then results in a harmonious relationship with the infinite, with one another, with the earth, and actions that are in harmony with the highest good. We all know that, we start off on the path, and we have in our life, ways that we live, things that we do they don't contribute to health, that don't contribute to harmony in our relationships, right? And then
oh yeah, maybe just one or two.
yeah. And then as we awaken, we say, oh, those behaviors are not useful. So the same is true on a planetary level. We start being aware. I mean, in simple ways, we don't want to put toxic things into the garbage, and put it into the landfill and harm the earth. So we start thinking about, how do I live in a way that is in harmony with the well-being of all? And how can my actions contribute to health and well-being and justice? So we individually start to do that out of a change in consciousness. So this planetary evolution is simply the outpicturing of a mass awakening in global consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if we were going to point to one action that people could take to contribute to that, what would you say? What's at the top of your list?
Well, I'm going to say, I'll say 3 actions.
All right.
Because those are the core practices of Kriya Yoga that I think come into play so strongly for us today. And, the first is self-discipline. So, that's learning to live in the highest way. And, underlying these is, of course, the practice of meditation that helps us see what we need to do. And study the nature of the mind, so you can understand how it works. You can learn about the ego. You can learn about the awakening of planetary consciousness. And surrender, let go of the sense of being separate from others, from the earth, from God, and also of the sense that you're on your own, and know that they're coming from the very heart of consciousness itself is this evolutionary thrust. So, you're already on the boat. And as Sri Ramakrishna said, all you need to do is raise your sail.
Oh, such a lovely image. Well, when I asked you for the one, recommendation, what I was thinking about from my own life is meditation and having a regular meditation practice, which has been transformative, I think, for me. And I know for many others that I've spoken to. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily easy to do it, but that's where the other things that you were talking about come in, the self-discipline and the study, where you notice when the difference when you haven't been meditating, and of course surrender. So thank you for that.
I think that is really true. And as Kriya yogis, we emphasize that it's important to meditate every day, and it's important to meditate what Yogananda would call scientifically, to use a methodology that really helps you change your consciousness, not to just sit and drift or not listen to a tape that takes you to a beach somewhere, but, really understand how consciousness works. And so this morning, I really want to lift up the importance of study, not just study in terms of, the practice of learning to observe your actions, which is critical, but study this viewpoint about that Kriya Yoga has to offer about our awakening world, because that's really medicine for our time right now, and we really need it. We really need to see that there's a much larger picture that we can draw hope from, and that also we can understand that we need to get on with, cooperating with it, not waste our time, but be very focused on how we support planetary evolution.
I was just hearing the echo of Roy, of your teacher, Roy Eugene Davis, of his words there. It's kind of was sounding like, it's like, people, do what you know you should do. Yeah. So can you mention, for people who are interested in doing that study, what are some resources that they could use?
I think, any of the books by Roy Eugene Davis, he always mentions in his books the importance of being aware of the planetary cycles, and understanding how to awaken in consciousness and be part of that evolutionary thrust. So anything by Roy Eugene Davis. And, I was looking back in an older book that I really love, and I'm not sure that it's even still available. He has one called Our Awakening World. And it's really a beautiful title, and one that inspired me early on. And of course, Paramahansa Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi, and Swami Sri Yukteswar's little book, The Holy Science, will give you the theory, of the Yugas, the ages of the evolution of consciousness on the planet, and where we are today with it. So any of those would be helpful.
Oh, that's great. I think it's lovely to leave people with an idea of where they can turn. So you did mention, and I know I have been intermittently dealing with this myself, the fear and getting triggered into this. There's a tamasic, or, dark kind of quality, a lot of that's going on in the world right now. So what do you say to people who are experiencing that fear?
Well, there's, yoga gives us so many remedies for dealing with fear, which of course arises in the mind. I think, my own experience has been, it's so useful to have a spiritual teacher. For me, I'm a disciple in a yoga tradition, and I have always been able to look to my guru for inspiration and support. And so for me, that has probably been the most transformative thing, because when you're part of a tradition, you can sort of lean into that and feel the support of your guru, your guru's guru. So for me, of course, that's been Roy Eugene Davis and Paramahansa Yogananda. And the way that spiritual teachers can help you in the moment to draw from ancient teachings, because in a tradition, they are grounded in timeless teachings. So, you're not, you don't have to put your attention, solely on what's going on in the moment on the surface of things. You learn about ancient principles, and you learn how they're verified in scripture, through time. So for example, we've been talking about, planetary evolution, planetary awakening. And there's a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita that our gurus would draw from, that is about the avatar, or that influence that comes on earth, to awaken consciousness. And that's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, the 4th chapter, verses 6 and 7. whenever and wherever divinity becomes subdued and humanity struggles to emerge out of ignorance, then and there I incarnate myself, to assure salvation to the virtuous, to awaken the ignorant, and thereby to manifest divinity on earth, I incarnate myself from time to time. So, of course, sometimes this is seen, as a hope for a savior, like, somebody's going to arrive on the scene and clear all this up. But the yogis in our tradition, although we acknowledge that there are illumined, enlightened beings who come and who really help to shine that light on earth, there is also this as an influence. You could call it the avatar influence, which I've written about in my book as well, The Jewel of Abundance, that we can be part of that influence for changing consciousness on the planet.
Oh, such a lovely thought. And with that, we're at the break. You're listening to the Yoga Hour with host and founder of the Yoga Hour, Yogacharya O'Brian, and we're discussing planetary transformation in our awakening world. Welcome back from the break. I'm Dr. Laurel Trujillo. I'm here today with Yoga Hour host and founder, Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brian. And in the first segment, we were really talking about Kriya Yoga and planetary awakening and this vision that has been present in this lineage of Kriya Yoga through many teachers that this was a process that was happening in our world, that it is an awakening world, that there is planetary evolution going on, and that in our tradition, teachers would use different methods for getting that word out, for making the teachings more accessible to people, which brings us to this show, because this was something that you, Yogacharya O'Brian, saw an opportunity for. And I did want to mention to listeners who may not be aware, but we recently passed the 10th anniversary of this show, which began on September 23rd, 2010. So the end of September, we passed our 10th anniversary. So I wanted to take a moment, Yogacharya, to ask you about your original vision for the Yoga Hour. What was it? What led you to want to do this show 10 years ago?
Well, life itself, and my guru and the gurus before him, my guru would say it a beautiful affirmation, that has remained so strongly with me, and I know with many of his students and with my students that I work with today. He would say, there is a power for good that runs this universe, and we can learn to cooperate with it. Mm-hmm. And so I think people, initially come to that and think about, okay, well, how can I change my life for the better? There's this power for good. There's this enlivening power that's running the universe, and I can improve my life by, which is true, learning how to cooperate with this uplifting evolutionary power in my life. But then, as we awaken, we begin to think about it in more global planetary terms. How can I contribute to the greater good? How can I cooperate to be an instrument for good? And what I have learned in serving over the years in this tradition of Kriya Yoga is the process goes something like intending, praying, intending, preparing yourself to be an instrument, an evolutionary instrument in the world, something that God can work through. And so Kriya means action or purification or sanctification. Those actions that support oneness, that support self and God realization. So, part of that process is preparing ourselves to be instruments of this avatar influence that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. And then intending, just opening ourselves, like, use me Let me be an instrument of your peace, as St. Francis would say.
Right.
Let me be an instrument of your love. Let me be part of this awakening trend on the planet. And so, we learn about it. We affirm, we have faith in the possibility, and we prepare ourselves. We intend to be an instrument, and then life itself will present opportunities. And this is true in all of our lives, and it's true in terms of how the yoga hour came to be. The yoga hour began in the very beginnings of Unity Online Radio when they were putting programs together. And I felt it was a privilege to be part of that conversation and to have an invitation to be part of it. And because I am aware of what I'm supposed to be doing, what my part is,
Right.
I said, I would love to be a part of it if I could bring teachings of yoga. And that was really welcomed by Unity. And, we talked about, the historical agreement or harmony between New Thought and yoga that occurred from the very beginning, and how those philosophies really work to support one another. When Paramahansa Yogananda came to America, I think, so many of those who were drawn to him to learn about meditation and healthy living and, this idea of planetary evolution were already students of New Thought. And he himself, had friendships with New Thought teachers. He had friendship with Ernest Holmes, and I'm sure he was aware of the work of the Fillmores. And there was this beautiful harmonious exchange that occurred that we could also look at as part of this thrust of planetary awakening, East and West coming together. And this was the vision that the gurus of Kriya Yoga had about Kriya Yoga coming to the West, that there would be a harmonious exchange that would contribute to, planetary awakening and harmony between the religions. So we have to look for when life presents opportunities. So the yoga hour came up as an opportunity, and then we have to be willing, to cooperate with these opportunities once we discern that it would be useful. And generally, I have found that life presents opportunities, and there are opportunities to step into contributing to this evolutionary thrust. But we ourselves have to evolve in order to do it. And so I don't, have any experience in podcasting or radio programming.
Right.
And so I had to, take it on faith that I could do it and prepare myself and learn about it. And and draw people, to me who would support it, who would be part of it. And of course, Dr. Trujillo, you're absolutely one of them, who came on during the time that I started traveling so much to promote my new book, to have a co-host that would allow the program to continue. So that's been really great.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like your hope was that the yoga hour would help promote this vision of an awakening world, and yoga teachings more generally. So has that hope been realized for you?
It's still being realized, and I think the fact that we're in the 10th, having the 10th anniversary of the yoga hour says a lot, that it is meaningful. And of course, when I look at the teachers, the gurus in our tradition, they used any means necessary,
Right.
to get the positive message, and,
Right.
how to live effectively, how to contribute to planetary awakening. When we look at what Yogananda did when he came to America, he taught everywhere and anywhere he was invited. He began to distribute lessons through the mail, which, if you think about the ancient rishis, of course, that was not done.
Right.
And then my teacher, he made a record. He made an absolute, like a 33, whatever it was, those big records on how to meditate. And,
Wow.
he was on radio shows continuously, speaking at New Thought churches and writing books. And so, I think perhaps the most thrilling part for me of Yoga Hour was the many opportunities I had as a host, to welcome my own teacher to the program.
Right.
And he always loved being on it. And, what a thrill that was for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for me as well. I had some of those conversations with him as well. So as the host for the majority of the shows that have gone on over the last 10 years, has anything surprised you?
Well, I think the main thing, I don't know that I would call it a surprise, but it's more of an affirmation, which is the growing interest in all things yoga and the increasing scientific exploration of what the Vedic teachings have been, putting forth for centuries. So, just in line with this topic of planetary evolution, what we're seeing, whether it's, through the science of Ayurveda or the science of yoga, we're seeing, people come in with, neuroscientists, who are exploring what actually goes on in the brain, immunologists who are looking at what goes on in the body, and seeing so much wisdom in yoga. And so we've had, guests, doctors and scientists, on the program who have really helped us see the way the wisdom of yoga stands up today.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. I can think of, we've had cardiologists, we've had, I know Marty Woodkey has been a guest a few times talking about his work with the brain, with brain science, and all kinds of people along that line. Yes, absolutely. So has there been a particularly memorable experience for you in your years now, 10 years with the show?
Well, I think I just have mentioned that, which is, which will just stay with me, was, being able to have a heart-to-heart conversation with my own guru in which people all over the world could listen in. That's very moving to me. And I'm so grateful, that he was willing to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for listeners who missed those programs, you can actually go to our archive at Unity Online Radio / the Yoga Hour and just put Roy Eugene Davis's name in the search box, and there will be many episodes with him that come up. So be great for people who are interested to follow up on that. So was there anything else that you wanted to say about this experience that you've had over 10 years? When I think about 10 years ago, podcasts it was really a radio show to start with. And then it kind of became, the podcast part of it became more prominent as people really turned to podcasts. And then of course, now there are so many, everybody has a podcast now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's a wonderful way, that we can learn. And, we always have to take what we learn and put it into practice. So it's a way to be inspired, I think. We've had the privilege of working, with many people who have put out really important books in the field.
Yes.
And, a highly esteemed yoga teachers, so yoga masters. And so we can get a glint of inspiration from them, and then have the opportunity to read their books and then to put into practice, what we are learning. So I see it as, a spark of information that goes out into the universe, and a spark of inspiration, and that can be a light of hope, and especially in these difficult times. And I want to thank you for, as I mentioned, stepping in when I was so much on the road, and now, of course, I want to share with our listeners that you're stepping in a much bigger way, as I have invited Dr. Trujillo to step into the role as our host, our primary host of the Yoga Hour, and to carry it on, into the future. I'm not leaving. I will continue to be her guest as I am today, and as often as we can make that possible. But, one of the teachings of yoga is that we honor the times in our life. Like, we have various periods in our life and tasks that are important at that time. And, I'm entering what is called the Vanaprastha stage of life, where it's important to be a little more in seclusion. For me, it's time to write and to be able to meditate more while I'm still leading my community and still teaching. It's also time for me to be mentoring others and to pass on these avenues of the work so they can go, continue on way into the future. So Dr. Trujillo couldn't be a better choice. She's a disciple in the Kriya Yoga tradition. She's an ordained minister of Kriya Yoga and also a medical doctor. So everything that we need to carry the program forth is here with you. And I'm grateful that you were willing to make yourself an instrument.
Well, thank you so much for that opportunity. Of course, it's an honor to do that, and I look forward to being the host and also to having you on as a guest. That will be so we can continue these conversations that I do love, having the opportunity to speak with you about things and to have you be able to share that with our audience. So if you have a hope for the show going forward, is there anything that you would say?
My hope for everything that I have put forth in our Kriya Yoga tradition, and I think is similar to, I can just guess that my guru would say, is that it remain close to the root. Mm-hmm. In other words, we are part of an enlightenment tradition, and the pull of the world is always strong. And, yoga can become diluted and diluted. And, it can become materialistic. It can just get too thin around the edges. And so I have worked hard, over these 10 years to bring in people who were really grounded in that vision of enlightenment, who were doing their own work and who were putting forth useful teachings. And so, that's my hope, that the work continues to be grounded in this root of enlightenment. And I know that it will, as long as you're sitting in that seat, because you and I will continue to work together and guide the vision for the program.
Mm-hmm. No, indeed. That's exactly what I wanted to be. And perhaps I should mention that a little while ago, maybe 6 or 9 months ago, Unity began to have data available about our listener base, about where people are listening from. And that was really heartening to see that, of course, our main audience, I think it was around 65 to 70% of people are listening from within the United States, but that we really have a global audience. And that made me feel really good. These teachings are being made available. It's a big, wide open door for Kriya Yoga and an opportunity for people to get to know you and to get to know the teachings that you offer, and hopefully maybe follow up with one of your many wonderful online programs that are now available. That's another new medium that you're using, the same way that Yogananda started to use the brand new technology in the, in the 20s and 30s of the mailing lessons. And now we, of course, have this online stuff. You have a YouTube channel that we mentioned, and of course your books and all the other online programs. The daily meditation, morning meditation, I think is a wonderful offering for people, 6:30 to 7:30 every morning. And then there's also an afternoon meditation at 4. So lots and lots of opportunities for people to practice together.
Yes, thank you for mentioning all those things.
So we have about 3 or 4 more minutes. I do want to ask you for words of encouragement or inspiration, as we always like to close the show with that. But I'll just open it up. Is there anything else you'd like to share about this topic of planetary evolution, about our awakening world, and about the yoga hour's role in all that?
I think I'll just give the last words to my guru, reading from his book, Our Awakening World, The Promise of the Ages, that mankind will be enlightened and the world transformed is the hope of humanity and the promise of the ages. This aspiration emerging from the depths of the soul is the evidence of events to come and the assurance of fulfillment of the evolutionary plan for the world process. Sent forth into manifestation from the heart of the Oversoul, the universe is self-nourishing and self-supporting. Throughout the entire process, there is a dynamic inclination in the direction of ultimate completion. As conscious men and women learn to increasingly harmonize with nature's laws, order and righteousness will increasingly prevail. In our current time cycle, we are witnessing the unveiling of predestined occurrences which no person or circumstance can prevent. How do we know this? Why can we be so certain about the near and distant future of planet Earth and its inhabitants? We know this at the innermost level of our being, and we have had the vision confirmed by saints and seers of various times and cultures. Because we have been part of the cosmic process from the beginning, we subjectively know how the universe works. This understanding has from time to time been clearly revealed to certain more fully conscious people, and they have shared their understanding with us through the spoken and written world. And, he goes on to say, it's going to take time for this emergence fully in our planet, but that we should know that we're in the early stages of an emerging time of awakening on our planet, and we all can and should be a part of that.
That's just wonderful. It's so hopeful. That was really a wonderful cap to our discussion, and hopefully a way that people will. I love that imagery that he had of it's coming from the heart of the universal process. That that's why it will be successful. It's because it's coming from that process itself. That's right. the winds of grace, as you said. We're already on the boat. All we need to do is just raise the sail, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that, because that heart of the universe is our very heart, that we can know it. We can know it. So when we hear that hopeful voice, we're stirred by it because we know in our heart of hearts that it's true.
One of the many things that I love about the depth of these yoga teachings, really, truly a wonderful opportunity for a lifetime of study. Really, there's so much to see. There's always something new to learn.
Yeah, I'm grateful that in the Vedic perspective, there's more than one lifetime, because I need it in terms of my study of the Vedic teachings. I feel like I'm really just scratching the surface. I'm just beginning. And, Sri Yukteswar, who wrote a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, said the same thing about his own study of the Gita, that he didn't know the Gita. He was only just beginning. And that's exciting to me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Yogacharya O'Brian, for joining me today. I've really enjoyed speaking with you here on the Yoga Hour.
And thank you, Dr. Trujillo, and thank you for stepping into the lead role on Yoga Hour. And I want to encourage, first I want to thank all of our listeners and subscribers, because it's really, a part that you are doing, of course, in Planetary Awakening. And I want to encourage you to continue on and to share about the Yoga Hour with, people would be interested in it. That's really helpful. And I know that Yoga Hour is going to be in really good hands.
I should mention that you have one more episode that you're going to be hosting in a few weeks. And then after that, toward the, I think it's the week before Thanksgiving, I'll be officially taking over as the host. So you've been listening to the Yoga Hour. It's been my pleasure to share this time with you. I'm Dr. Laurel Trujillo, co-host and producer of the show, and we've been discussing Kriya Yoga and planetary evolution, ancient teachings in a modern era, with, of course, Yogacharya O'Brian. You can find out more about Yogacharya at her website, ellengraceo'brien.com, and also the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment's many online programs you can find out about at csecenter.org. Join us next time when I will be joined by Beth Spindler, a practicing yoga therapist, yoga teacher, and author, and we'll be discussing courageous living, treating anxiety and fear with yoga therapy. The Yoga Hour is a service project of the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, a meditation center in the Kriya Yoga tradition. Remember to subscribe to the Yoga Hour podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And as Yogacharya mentioned, we'd love it if you'd share it with a friend. Thank you to the Yoga Hour team, regular host, founder, director of the Yoga Hour, and our guest today, Yogacharya O'Brian, assistant producers Ann Hayes and Mickey Coronado, CSE's Global Outreach Manager, Holly Gray, and Jeff Comfort and Louis Pagan in the sound booth at unity.fm. I look forward to being with you again. Until then, remember, you carry your own healing and wholeness within you. Share your peace and joy with all you meet. Bye now.